So here in the UK it is Mother's Day coming up, so I'm going to make something for my mum. Now there's a story to the whole frog thing with my mum. When I was a little girl she was terrified of frogs, and me being a charming little girl sometimes used to chase her up and down the garden with a frog in my hand. We had a pond in the garden, so there were plenty of frogs. Anyway, it's a running joke because Mum has since learnt to kind of tolerate frogs. So we're going to make her a little frog. Now, because it is Mother's Day and because these are just too darn cheerful to not do something with, we're going to do a frog with some flowers in. Got my little mat ready to put my mucky stirry stick on. I've got my little mixing pot to mix the resin in. Obviously we've got the frog, so I'm going to push this out of the way. And yeah, got my resin. Now the resin I'll be using is the one that I use quite a lot, which is the 1:1 resin from Let's Resin. So we'll be using that. We will also be using, I think I'm going to give it a little bit of a sparkle by putting a little bit of this alcohol ink in it. It's that Marabou Rainbow. Just a tiny little bit of sparkle, but I'll give it a blooming good shake first. That's it really, we're just going to chuck it in. Now the flowers we're going to have to do something with to stop the bubbles sticking in them too much. I don't mind the odd bubble, but I'll come up with something. Right, let's mix this resin up. And this pot is a 100ml pot, but I'm not going to fill it right up because that makes it hard to stir. So I'm going to do 80. Just leaving a little bit of room in the top. And I might have to mix a bit more up again. Can't remember how much this frog takes, but I don't have any problem with just doing a bit at a time. So let's get this stirred up. I'll speed this bit up for you because you don't want to be watching me stirring, do you? Okay, that's mixed up fairly well. We'll let it degas a bit. At this point I'm going to put just a little spot of the Marabou Rainbow in. There you go. And it's all over my mat as well. Look what it's doing, it's even acting funky on my mat. Anyway, that's just to give it a little bit of a shimmer. And I'm going to mix it in rather than let it sit on the surface. So, there we go. Right, now let's cut these flowers up. So I'm just going to give it a bit of a test. I think all three are going to go in, but we're going to need to cut them down. I'm going to leave the stalks quite long at first, I think, so I can just see how it's all working. We might use the leaves as well in the base. So they're all about the same size. Now I think what I'm going to do is dunk each one in the resin, like so, and give it a really good squish about first. Let's see if we can get a good coat of resin on it. You can see, I don't know if you can see that, there's bubbles coming off it already. And then I'm just going to plonk it in here. Okay, and we're going to do the same with the others. Give them a good squish in the resin. Just take my stick out, that might be easier, mightn't it? Pop it on my messy mat. Now, these are fabric flowers. I'm presuming they'll hold the colour. We'll soon see, won't we? Right. That is really pushing a load of bubbles down into that pot of resin. Never mind, this is just a fun, funky one, isn't it? That shimmer looks like it's gone quite nice on the flowers. So there we are. Just trying to make sure I get some right into his little fingers. So the other thing about doing things with flowers in for my mum, yes, I know mums just like flowers, don't they? But mum actually, towards the end of her career, was in horticulture. She's a very keen gardener as well, so yeah, flowers make sense for my mum particularly. Ooh, gone everywhere with that. Now this actually isn't taking much more than the resin I've mixed, which I'm surprised. I thought it would take a bit more than that. So I'm just going to let this keep running off from the pot for a minute. There's bubbles coming out from under the flowers. Might give them another little bodge up and down in a minute. So I'm not going to have to mix much more resin up here. It's just going to be the tiniest little spot. And the flowers are starting to rise. I'm actually quite pleased about that because I didn't want them really to be tight against the surface of the frog. So although that wasn't exactly planned, I think that's quite good. That one I want to be fairly central and fairly close to his nose. It doesn't have to be completely flat. Right, and I can now see what the height's doing, so I'm going to trim. Oh no, actually I'll leave the stalks on because I think I'm going to have to trim quite a long way down because of how they're rising. They're rising a bit more, actually a bit too much now. Oh, it's neither one thing nor the other, is it? But there's bubbles coming out from underneath them as well. This resin has gone quite thick considering it is in a warm room. I mean, there's a bit of depth to it, but I wouldn't have thought it would cause that quite so much. Okay, we're going to let that sit, I think. Let the bubbles dissipate. Just going to let that sit for a minute while I mix up a little tad more resin. That's the last bit coming out of the pot now. Right, verdict on the volume of this frog then. I reckon overall about 90 millilitres. I'm only going to need about another 10. I think. So let's just do that. Let's do that now while they settle. Yep, they are floating up. I can see them floating. Which has surprised me actually. I mean, whilst I'm making happy noises about them floating, I didn't think they'd float that much. But doing a bit of bodging up and down, you can see there's more bubbles coming out there. So I'm just going to tip a little bit more resin in, and then we'll actually, do I put the let's put the leaves in first. Not sure how many leaves I'm going to need. It's a shame to cut these up, doesn't it? These were really cheap, by the way. These were from Dunelm, I think. A bit big to go in the bottom of this, so I'm just going to take some little bits out like that. Just to give it a background, really. That's it. I'm just going to cut these up into little bits, getting resin everywhere so they're getting a bit soggy. Yeah, if I just push those in like that, it's just to get a bit of green behind it, really. Just to set the flowers off. Of course I could put a green layer in the bottom, couldn't I? Thinking. Anyway, I don't think so. I think I'm just going to leave them like that so there's a bit of green behind it. And I'm going to leave his legs clear. Just going to leave them clear, I think. I think overall this does want to be quite a clear creation. I'm not going to put any more sparkle in this either because I think there's plenty. So just going to top it up, and then I might come and check on it in a few minutes, just see if I can see how far up the little flowers have come. Yeah, that's enough resin. See, it's gone right into his little fingers. Are they fingers? They have hands and feet, don't they, frogs? They're not paws. I take it that's what they're called anyway. They're certainly not paws. Paws are for furry things, aren't they? Okay, yes, so there you go. If anybody's got one of these moulds and wants to know how much resin it takes, spot on 90 millilitres by the look of it. Just let the last bit drip out. Okay, so I'll this is a quick easy one, isn't it? I'll see you for the demould, which, as it's getting into the evening now, that will be in the morning. I'll have given it a good number of hours to firm up. I'm going to spray it with some alcohol spray, I think, just to help dissipate those last bubbles. Just the last little drips coming out of my pot. Let's just give it a quick scoop round. Incidentally, if anybody's curious about my little tray that I'm dropping my stirry stick in, yes, it is just one of those trinket moulds that many of us have got. Cheap and cheerful mould. And what I do is, if I mix up too much resin and end up having to tip some out somewhere, I just keep tipping it into that mould. I've always got that one handy. And then eventually I've got a bowl. And you end up with some really funky colours and things in it. And then I just made a little silicone mat to fit it. So then take that little silicone mat out and give it a clean. There we go. Now I think that is, yeah, that's all his little toesies full and everything. So I'll see you for the demould. Right, it's been a good few hours now, about 8 or 9 hours, something like that. I'm just going to bring you in close because we're going to do the demould. And before I do though, as you can see, I've trimmed off the plant stalks, which has left little holes. They were hollow though. It's interesting, isn't it? I've trimmed it off as close as I can, but you can probably see it's still a little bit raised. So what I shall be doing is giving it a quick sand over and probably just run a coat of resin straight over the top just to flatten it off. I keep snipping at it to try and get down as much as I can first. Anyway, that won't take long to do. And that'll fill those little holes up too. Not that I suppose they matter. Anyway, let's have a demould. It's been quite cool in my craft room overnight. The heating went off and we've had snow. So I won't say it's cold in the house, because this house is never cold, but it has been a bit cooler. So that's probably why his little fingers and things are still soft, because by now this probably should have firmed up, but hey. Just trying to loosen everything off first, make sure his little hands and feet are okay. Not any broken fingers. At least because it's slightly soft, that's less likely, I suppose. There we are. Okay, so I think I've got everything loose except for his head, which I'm just going to pull away. I used to just whip the mould straight off, but I am finding that going around and just loosening it first and then going in straight with the tricky bit, which in his case is his head. It's not that tricky, but you know, that seems to work. Right, now let's go for his bum. Got the head well loose anyway. Oh, this is looking good. Oh, I like it. Ah. So, silk flowers cheap from any old shop, although I think the nicer your silk flowers the better. Oh no, he's got a ripple in the back. Wonder what caused that. Can you see? Might be able to smooth that off with some UV resin. However, yeah, a little bit of sparkles worked, it didn't overdo it. Flowers look great. That's a shame because the shine on this mould's wonderful. There's a little patch that's kind of like got a weird surface to it. I'm going to let that sit and see what happens because it feels like it's almost like there's a bubble under there. The surface like move, look, can you see that? Isn't that weird? So I'm going to let it sit, I'll have a little clean up. And we'll sand the bottom, I don't know whether to colour his eyes in or not. There are one or two bubbles in there, can you see one in that flower there? But I think that kind of adds to the effect. So, yeah, we have a frog. I'll sort this out in a bit, but I'm going to leave it for another couple of hours. Make sure it's fully firmed properly before I go sanding the bottom and try to sort out whatever's gone on here. Right, back in a bit.